relearned a very important lesson the other day. There we go. Um, don't take for granted that your setup has not changed since the last time you used it to do a particular job. Particularly when you have one good microphone in the house and the rest are okay, but not good. This is the best microphone we have in the house for sure. And we used it to do a game stream, I think, with myself and Alice, because it can record an area which little headset mics and whatnot can't do. And I still had it set up to do that the last time I recorded chapter 5 and 6. And they're very different jobs. So when I went back and checked chapter 5 and 6 and did all the editing, the mastering, the special effects editing and whatnot, over the last few days, we found the distortion was incredible. It was way over the top. Everything we were doing was just crazy. So I've gone and I've reset the microphone. And everything should be okay. But I'm not going to be Mr. Cocky Man today. I'm going to keep the headphones on and make sure I know that everything sounds okay. I mean, you do get awfully used to your own setup, right? And you know, sort of when things are working. Check. Recording device is set to the Yeti. Yes. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ichine san shi go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello. Excellent. That all looks good. I may be a little paranoid and over the top, making sure, counting to 10 in 3 different languages and all that sort of nonsense, but I just want to make absolutely sure that I'm not wasting my time, because we did go through, record both chapters, do the master editing on both chapters, and then do the sound effects editing on all those chapters. And when they were finished, I went, I'm not sure. So I gave them to my wife to listen to, and she was like, there is something, like the quality doesn't sound as good. And she was right. I was hoping, like, sometimes I think there's a huge problem, and it's just not. It's not a problem at all. But this time it was. So we're going to start again. We're going to throw out all that work and do it all over again. Okay, so let's start, shall we? From the beginning of chapter 5 of the Gutenberg.org copy of The Invisible Man. Here we go. Chapter 5. The Burglary at the Vicarage. The facts of the burglary at the vicarage came to us chiefly through the medium of the vicar and his wife. It occurred in the small hours of Whit Monday, the day devoted in Epping to the club festivities. Mrs. Bunting, it seems, woke up suddenly in the stillness that comes before the dawn, with the strong impression that the door of their bedroom had opened and closed. She did not arouse her husband at first, but sat up in bed, listening. She then distinctly heard the pad, pad, pad of bare feet coming out of the adjoining dressing room and walking along the passage towards the staircase. As soon as she felt assured of this, she aroused the Reverend Mr. Bunting as quickly as possible. He did not strike a light, but putting on his spectacles, her dressing gown, and his bath slippers, he went out on the landing to listen. He heard, quite distinctly, a fumbling going on at his study desk downstairs, and then a violent sneeze. At that, he returned to his bedroom, armed himself with the most obvious weapon, the poker, and descended the staircase as noiselessly as possible. Mrs. Bunting came out on the landing. The hour was about 4, and the ultimate darkness of the night was past. There was a faint shimmer of light in the hall, but the study doorway yawned impenetrably. There was a faint shimmer of light in the hall, but the study doorway yawned impenetrably black. Everything was still, except the faint creaking of the stairs under Mr. Bunting's tread and the slight movements in the study. Then something snapped. The drawer was opened, and there was a rustle of papers. Then came an imprecaution, and a match was struck, and the study was flooded with yellow light. Mr. Bunting was now in the hall, and through the crack of the door he could see the desk and the open drawer and a candle burning on the desk, but the robber he could not see. He stood there in the hall, undecided what to do, and Mrs. Bunting, her face white and intent, crept slowly downstairs after him. One thing kept Mr. Bunting's courage: the persuasion that this burglar was a resident in the village. They heard the chink of money, and realized that the robber had found the housekeeping reserve of gold, £2.10 in half sovereigns altogether. At that sound, Mr. Bunting would... Sorry, I'll do that one again. £2.10 in half sovereigns altogether. At that sound, Mr. Bunting was nerved to abrupt action. Gripping the poker fiercely, he rushed into the room, closely followed by Mrs. Bunting. "Surrender!" Wait. The vicar, Mr. Bunting, has a very specific voice. It's a terrible voice. I made it up on the spur of the moment, but it will do. Oh, we've got some chat. Hello, says Nico. Hello, what are you doing? I'm recording. And Lazy Boy, hello. Yes, I'm re-recording chapters 5 and 6 of The Invisible Man, because I messed up the earlier recording. Okay. Hello, this is Mr. Bunting, the vicar, Mr. Bunting. "Surrender!" cried Mr. Bunting fiercely, and then stooped, amazed. Apparently, the room was perfectly empty. Yet their conviction that they had that very moment heard somebody moving in the room had amounted to a certainty. For half a minute, perhaps, they stood gaping. Then Mrs. Bunting went across the room and looked behind the screen, while Mr. Bunting, by a kindred impulse, peered under the desk. Then Mrs. Bunting turned back the window curtains, and Mr. Bunting looked up the chimney and probed it with a poker. Then Mrs. Bunting scrutinized the waste paper basket, and Mr. Bunting opened the lid of the coal scuttle. Then they came to a stop, and stood with eyes interrogating each other. "I could have sworn," said Mr. Bunting. "The candle," said Mr. Bunting. "Who lit the candle?" "The drawer," said Mrs. Bunting, "and the money's gone." She went hastily to the doorway. "Of all the strange occurrences—" There was a violent sneeze in the passage. They rushed out, and as they did so, the kitchen door slammed. "Bring the candle," said Mr. Bunting, and led the way. They both heard a sound of bolts being hastily shot back. As he opened the kitchen door, he saw through the scullery that the back door was just opening, and the faint light of early dawn displayed the dark masses of the garden beyond. He is certain that nothing went out of the door. It opened, stood open for a moment, and then closed with a slam. As it did so, the candle Mrs. Bunting was carrying from the study flickered and flared. It was a minute or more before they entered the kitchen. The place was empty. They refastened the back door, examined the kitchen, pantry, and scullery. They refastened the back door, examined the kitchen, pantry, and scullery thoroughly, and at last went down into the cellar. There was not a soul to be found in the house, search as they would. Daylight found the vicar and his wife, a quaintly costumed little couple, still marvelling about on their own ground floor by the unnecessary light of a guttering candle. There's 3 really weird things about that chapter. First, when he says, "I could have sworn," said Mr. Bunting. "The candle," said Mr. Bunting. Twice in a row, you say, "said Mr. Bunting." That's really weird. We would not do that in the modern age. Then also, when it's all in past tense until he is certain that nothing went out of the door. That's present tense. He suddenly switches from past tense to present tense. That's very, very weird. The third one is try saying this one 5 times fast. Examine the kitchen, pantry, and scullery thoroughly. Scullery thoroughly. That's not easy. Not easy. All right, moving on. Chapter 6. Wait, I'm going to turn up my volume a bit. There we go. Okay. Chapter 6. The Furniture That Went Mad. Now, it happened that in the early hours of Whit Monday, before Milly had been hunted out for the day, Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall both rose and went noiselessly down into the cellar. Their business there was of a private nature, and had something to do with the specific gravity of their beer. They had hardly entered the cellar when Mrs. Hall found she had forgotten to bring down a bottle of sarsaparilla from their joint room. As she was the expert and principal operator in this affair, Hall, very properly, went upstairs for it. On the landing, he was surprised to see that the stranger's door was ajar. He went on into his own room and found the bottle as he had been directed, but, returning with the bottle, he noticed that the bolts of the front door had been shot back, that the door was, in fact, simply on the latch, and with a flash of inspiration he connected this with the stranger's room upstairs, and the suggestions of Mr. Teddy Henfrey. He distinctly remembered holding the candle while Mrs. Hall shot these bolts overnight. At the sight, he stopped, gaping, then, with the bottle still in his hand, went upstairs again. He rapped at the stranger's door. There was no answer. He rapped again, then pushed the door wide open and entered. It was as he expected. The bed, the room also, was empty. And what was stranger, even to his heavy intelligence, on the bedroom chair and along the rail of the bed were scattered the garments, the only garments, so far as he knew, and bandages of their guest. His big slouch hat, even, was cocked jauntily over the bedpost. His big slouch hat, even, was cocked jauntily over the bedpost. As Hall stood there, he heard his wife's voice coming out of the depths of the cellar, with that rapid telescoping of the syllables and interrogative cocking up of the final words to a high note, by which the West Sussex villager is wont to indicate a brisk impatience. "George, you got what I want?" At that he turned and hurried down to her. "Johnny! Johnny!" he said over the rail of the cellar steps. "'T's the truth what Henfrey says. He's not in his room, he ain't, and the front door's unbolted." At first Mrs. Hall did not understand, and as soon as she did, she resolved to see the empty room for herself. Hall, still holding the bottle, went first. "If he ain't there," he said, "his clothes are, and what's he doing without his clothes, then? 'Tis a most curious business." As they came up the cellar steps, they both, it was afterwards ascertained, fancied they heard the front door open and shut, but seeing it closed and nothing there, neither said a word to the other about it at the time. Mrs. Hall passed her husband in the passage and ran on first upstairs. Someone sneezed on the staircase. Hall, following 6 steps behind, thought that he heard her sneeze. She, going on first, was under the impression that Hall was sneezing. She flung open the door and stood regarding the room. "Of all the curios," she said. Curios or curious? It says curious, but it's a complete sentence. Like, if that was cut off, of all the curious, you'd think of all the curious things or something like that, but yeah. Anyway, of all the curious. Yeah. "Of all the curious," she said. She heard a sniff behind her head as it seemed. She heard a sniff close behind her head as it seemed, and turning, was surprised to see Hall a dozen feet off on the topmost stair. But in another moment he was beside her. She bent forward and put her hand on the pillow and then under the clothes. "Cold," she said. He's been up this hour or more." As she did so, a most extraordinary thing happened. The bedclothes gathered themselves together, leapt up suddenly into a sort of peak, and then jumped headlong over the bottom rail. It was exactly as if a hand had clutched them in the center and flung them aside. Immediately after, the stranger's hat hopped off the bedpost, described a whirling flight in the air through the better part of a circle, and then dashed straight at Mrs. Hall's face. Then, as swiftly, came the sponge from the washstand, and then the chair, flinging the stranger's coat and trousers carelessly aside, and laughing dryly in a voice singularly like the stranger's, turned itself up with its four legs at Mrs. Hall, seemed to take aim at her for a moment, and charged at her. She screamed and turned, and then the chair legs came gently but firmly against her back and impelled her and Hall out of the room. The door slammed violently and was locked. The chair and bed seemed to be executing a dance of triumph for a moment, and then, abruptly, everything was still. Mrs. Hall was left almost in a fainting condition in Mr. Hall's arms on the landing. It was with the greatest difficulty that Mr. Hall and Milly, who had been roused by her scream of alarm, succeeded in getting her downstairs and applying the restoratives customary in such cases. "'Tis spirits," said Mrs. Hall. "I know 'tis spirits. I read it in papers of 'en. Tables and chairs leaping and dancing." "Take a drop more, Johnny," said Hall. "'Twill steady you." "Lock him out," said Mrs. Hall. "Don't let him come in again. I half guessed I might have known, with them goggling eyes and bandaged head and never going to church of a Sunday, and all they bottles, more'n it's right for anyone to have. He's put the spirits into the furniture. My good furniture! 'Twas in that very chair my poor dear mother used to sit when I was a little girl. To think it should rise up against me now!" "Just a drop more, Johnny," said Hall. "Your nerves is all upset." They sent Milly across the street through the golden 5 o'clock sunshine to rouse up Mr. Sandy Wadgers, the blacksmith. Mr. Hall's compliments, and the furniture upstairs was behaving most extraordinary. Would Mr. Wadgers come round? He was a knowing man, was Mr. Wadgers, and very resourceful. He took quite a grave view of the case. "I'm darned if that ain't witchcraft," was the view of Mr. Sandy Wadgers. "You want horseshoes for such gentry as he." He came round greatly concerned. They wanted him to lead the way upstairs to the room, but he didn't seem to be in any hurry. He preferred to talk in the passage. Over the way, Huxter's apprentice came out and began taking down the shutters of the tobacco window. He was called over to join in the discussion. Mr. Huxter naturally followed over in the course of a few minutes. The Anglo-Saxon genius for parliamentary government asserted itself. There was a great deal of talk, and no decisive action. "Let's have the facts first," insisted Mr. Sandy Wadgers. "Let's be sure we be acting perfectly right in busting that there door open. A door unbust is always open to busting, but you can't unbust a door once you bust it in." And suddenly, and most wonderfully, the door of the room upstairs opened of its own accord, and as they looked up in amazement, they saw, descending the stairs, the muffled figure of the stranger, staring more blackly and blankly than ever, with those unreasonably large blue glass eyes of his. He came down stiffly and slowly, staring all the time. He walked across the passage staring, then stopped. "Look there!" he said, and their eyes followed the direction of his gloved finger, and saw a bottle of sarsaparilla hard by the cellar door. Then he entered the parlor and suddenly, swiftly, viciously slammed the door in their faces. Not a word was spoken until the last echoes of the slam had died away. They stared at one another. "Well, if that don't lick Everton," said Mr. Wadgers, and left the alternative unsaid. "I'd go in and ask him about it," said Mr. Wadgers to Mr. Hall. "I'd demand an explanation." It took some time to bring the landlady's husband up to that pitch, but at last he rapped, opened the door, and got as far as, "Excuse me." "Go to the devil," said the stranger in a tremendous voice, and "shut that door after you." So that brief interview terminated. Sorry, I think I knocked something there. I have to record that last bit again. It's this headphone cable. Okay. "Shut that door after you." So that brief interview terminated. Alrighty, that was okay. Now, just export that. Tim 5-6 master. Export. Not too bad. I think that sounded all right. Sounded okay in my headphones anyway. Now, export. Tim 5-6 edit A. Okay, now I've got another piece. It's just a short story that I wrote for a competition, but that might be quite cool. Might make a fun little short story. So I thought I'd record this as well while we're here. Water, yes. I'm just going to have a little belt of the old H2O. Okay. Here we go. How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love Quantum Entanglement by Steve Parker. "Frankly, I don't believe you," said Mike down the phone line. "Also, I'm busy grading graduate papers right now, as you should be." "I'm telling you, Mike, I've made it work," replied Jason. "Sure, 10 years of constant failure, driven entirely by silly sci-fi nonsense, I might add, and... wait. Not sure about those. I hadn't thought about the voices at all. That's fine. I don't mind Mike being American. I think that's fine. Frankly, I don't believe you. Frankly, I don't believe you. That's okay. Mike needs a voice. I think we'll make him English maybe. "I'm telling you, Mike, I've made it work." Yeah, that's okay. That'll do. It's a little bit silly. No. We'll give Jason just my voice, I think. "I'm telling you, Mike, I've made it work." I've made it work. All right, cool. Let's just stop that recording and we'll go again. How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love Quantum Entanglement by Steve Parker. "Frankly, I don't believe you," said Mike down the phone line. "Also, I'm busy grading graduate papers right now, as you should be." "I'm telling you, Mike, I've made it work," replied Jason. "Sure, 10 years of constant failure, driven entirely by silly sci-fi nonsense, I might add, and all of the sudden, I wouldn't call 10 years of research and experimentation sudden, Mike. You know what I mean." Jason paused, withholding a deep sigh of exasperation. Mike was head of physical sciences at the university, and he needed his support for what was to come next. He carried on calmly. "Just come and see, please?" "Fine, but this had better not be another wasteful distraction like last time." "That was your birthday, Mike. We had to get you to the lab for your surprise party." "Exactly. I promise this will not be fun in any way. Just get down here, okay?" Jason hung up the phone and returned to his workspace, upon which sat the newest version of his device, his pride and joy. The end result of so many years of research and what felt at times to be an endless string of failures. 2 brass discs, each bordered by a trio of platinum poles about 6 inches tall, sat prominently atop an enormous steel frame. It looked like an oversized desktop computer box, brutal and square. He was sure Mike would comment mercilessly on its artless appearance, but there was good reason for it, at least for the moment. If everything went to plan, there would be ample time to make it look pretty for the paying public. 10 years of work. Almost $7 million in funding before the backers had withdrawn their support. And then hundreds of thousands more as Jason sold or mortgaged everything he owned, and quite a bit he did not, and begged from family and friends and took out loan after loan to get the resources needed to bring his creation to life. The sheer height of the stack of overdrawn credit cards alone would have put a disco queen's platform shoes to shame. If it worked, though, he would be able to pay it all back, and then make enough to build an entire wing on the university which would bear his name forever. Or, no, even better, build a whole new university. The Jason Rogers University for the brilliantly talented and moderately handsome in the right light, and he would live atop it like some sort of academic king in a gleaming marble tower overlooking the students below, dispensing wisdom like... All right, well, maybe that was going a bit too far, but he would certainly be able to wipe his debts clean, pay back everyone who had helped him achieve his dreams, and live a comfortably academic existence for the rest of his life. If it worked. He didn't let himself think about what would happen if it didn't. He busied himself checking connections and testing software while he waited for Mike to arrive. When he hadn't turned up half an hour later, Jason started polishing the exposed metal to a gleaming mirror finish. When Mike had still not arrived, Jason organized and reorganized the bowl of bananas on which he had been running tests, trying to find the most aesthetically pleasing arrangement, then changing his mind and organizing them by color, and then shape, and finally just tossing them in the bowl in exasperation and settling for pacing the floor. Eventually, almost 90 minutes later, the door swung open. Mike was not a man to waste time knocking. And Professor Michael Cheel appeared, not even trying to hide the mild anger and impatience through which he generally viewed the world and its less than brilliant inhabitants. "All right, I'm here," he said quickly. "This had better be worth it. The American accent, what am I doing to myself? This had better be worth it. Worth it. This had better be worth it. This had better be worth it. Worth it. Oh my God! American, why am I doing this to myself again?" This had better be worth it. Worth it. Worth it. This had better be worth it. Worth it. Can you imagine what it was like for me recording the entirety of The Great Gatsby in several American accents? It was hell. All right, I'm here, he said quickly. This had better be worth it. Oh, it will be, said Jason. One day you'll tell your grandkids you were here for this. I don't intend to have children, as you well know. Fine, grad kids then, huh? Jason grinned at this quip, hoping against hope that Mike would find it at least slightly amusing. Mike just stared, waiting impatiently. Right, sorry. Stand here, please. Jason indicated a spot behind a lead-lined safety screen with a protective glass panel at face height. Mike raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he took his place behind it. Jason stepped up to his gleaming device, took a deep breath, and began. As you know, I have been working on the idea of teleportation. Mike scoffed loudly behind his screen. Pah! For the last 10 years, said Jason, a little more angrily than he had probably intended. After seeing some silly Space Trek movie, said Mike mockingly. Star Trek, as I think you know perfectly well. Mike raised an eyebrow again, prompting Jason to reflect on Mike's Vulcan-like qualities for someone who professed to know nothing of the popular sci-fi series. Prompting Jason to reflect on Mike's Vulcan-like qualities for someone who professed to know nothing of the popular sci-fi series. Regardless, continued Jason, teleportation has been in the public zeitgeist for countless generations, Star Trek being only one recent example. Mike breathed as if to deliver a rejoinder on the futility of referencing sci-fi, which he viewed as pointless pseudoscience drivel for children, but Jason pressed ahead without leaving space for Mike's scorn. In 1997, an Austrian team led by Professor Anton Zellinger achieved the first successful experiment in teleportation. They were able to transfer the quantum state from one photon to another by entangling two photons. Building on this, a team of scientists at the University of Innsbruck succeeded in teleporting information encoded in quantum states of individual atoms in 2004. 4 years later, scientists at the University of Tokyo teleported quantum information across the city of Tokyo over a distance of several kilometers, utilizing optical fibers. Yes, I know all this, said Mike. And further distances have been reached since then, but this is quantum pairing we're talking about. Information being sent along fiber optic cable, which is a long way from the sort of teleportation dreamed of in your televisual nonsense. True, until now, responded Jason, grinning and unable to conceal his excitement. What do you mean? Asked Mike suspiciously. Are you claiming to be able to send quantum information further than 100 kilometers? Better than that, replied Jason. Watch. He reached over, picked up a banana, and placed it carefully in the center of one of the brass discs, carefully triple-checked various cables and other connections, picked up a nearby tablet, and stepped behind the protective screen with Mike, who was eyeing the device through the window, as well as the lead-lined partition itself. Is this safe? He asked, slightly nervously. Probably, replied Jason, unable to stop himself from gently teasing his superior. Don't worry, I've done this dozens of times. He tapped the screen of the tablet to wake it up and typed in his password. Complex, custom software lit up the screen, but Jason navigated it easily. He'd clearly used it a great deal during the experimental cycle. Wait, dementia's entered. Power nominal. Screening complete. Contact is good. Okay. Are you ready? He asked his colleague. Mike just nodded, his eyes glued to the banana. He was getting a little excited despite himself. Jason tapped a final button. Immediately, a low hum started in the room, which slowly rose in pitch and intensity. Small blue lights lit up at the end of each of the 3 platinum rods surrounding the left disc and began to pulse gently. Jason scanned informative readouts on his small screen and punched in commands which raised the intensity of the humming and the speed of the pulsing blue lights, which had shifted hue into the green. Meanwhile, lights on the empty brass disc were slowly lighting up blue, their flashes coming to match those on the left. Higher and louder the hum rose, faster and brighter pulsed the lights. Faster and faster danced Jason's fingers on the screen until with one final, "Here it comes," he hit a bright green button in the corner and raised his eyes to look at his machine for the first time since stepping behind the screen. The ambient lighting in the room dimmed as the power draw rose to absurd levels, and the machine gave one final almighty crack. The pulsing lights shimmered, and the banana disappeared from the left disc and reappeared on the right. The lights dimmed, the humming stopped, and the ambient lighting rose again. Jason grinned at the successful completion of the demonstration, then looked over to Mike, expecting to see his jaw dropping in awe. "Nice trick," said Mike, stony-faced. "What?" responded Jason, dumbfounded. "How did you do it?" "Distracted me with the lights while quick-release catchers dropped one banana and lifted up the other, I suppose." How can you say that?" stammered Jason. "Well, don't get me wrong, it was done very well. On a lesser mind, a normal member of the public, it would have worked perfectly. But you can't expect me to believe you actually teleported a banana from one disc to the other, can you?" "But you saw it!" exclaimed Jason defensively. Yes, but I once saw a magician saw a lady in half on a stage, and I didn't believe that either," said Mike, with a smug little smile on his face. 10 years I worked on this!" cried Jason in dismay. "Exactly. I know how much you've poured into this, and I know how desperate you are. But really, you're going to have to do better if you want me to put my reputation on the line and support your work." I can show you all the work," ejaculated Jason desperately. "You can replicate the experiment yourself." "Oh, I'm sure," responded Mike. "But only here, right? In your privately prepared lab? Come on, let's be serious. The technology has all but impossible, and even if it could be done, we are decades, if not centuries, away from anything even approaching this. Your demonstration was very impressive, but completely unbelievable." But I'm sorry, Jason. I really am, but this is complete nonsense. I'm going to have to report this, you know. If this is how you've been wasting your time and the university's limited resources, I see no option other than to recommend your removal." Without waiting for a response, Mike turned and exited the room, leaving Jason alone with his disappointment. As soon as he judged himself far enough away, he took out his phone and made a call. "Yes, I saw it. Yes, it worked. I think we can stop him here. Yeah, I know how important this is. Don't worry, you can rely on me." Mike took out a small black device and pressed a button. A cool blue glow surrounded him briefly, and he disappeared. Okay. I might re-record Jason's lines later, give him another voice, another accent, something like that. We'll see. It just seems to blend a little too much with the narration. Then again, it's only a short story. So, yeah. We'll see you later on. All right. Now, we'll copy all those files. There we go. Into the almighty Google Drive so I can access it on all computers. And then later on, we'll come in and start editing that. Great. Excellent. So, thank you very much for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed this or found something informative or interesting about it in any case. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow, and we'll be editing all of this stuff. At least the Invisible Man things. I'll have a think about that short story and see if I have to re-record a voice. Yeah, that's it. So see you tomorrow for the editing if you decide to come along. And if not, or regardless of that, I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Okay? Bye, 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 bye.